All right, we're recording. It's a regularly scheduled meeting. We're at the Legislative Office Building in Hartford, and we have a few members online. Members and speakers, please speak clearly into the microphone so that your comments can be recorded for the minutes. In a minute, I'm going to ask for a motion to move the City of West Haven up in the agenda, so we take them first. If someone would helpfully be ready to make that motion, that'd be great. After we do the minutes, does my co-chair have any opening remarks?
I do not. Thank you.
All right, we do have our public comment period as we do with every meeting. So if there are members of the public who wish to be provided an opportunity to speak, they can do so now. If you are wishing to speak, please wait to be recognized by the chair and limit your comments to 2 minutes due to our time constraints today. Speakers who have called in by phone, please press *6 to unmute. And if you can keep those comments short, we'd appreciate it. At this time, I'll recognize any member of the public wishing to speak. You see anybody out there, Simon? Okay. All right, then we'll move on to approval of the minutes. You had a copy of the draft minutes from our March 21st, 2025 special meeting. Any questions or comments about the minutes?
Motion to accept, Sal Luciano.
Motion made and seconded for approval of the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. We've approved the minutes. So if the board will indulge me, I would like to take up the West Haven matters first. Can I get a motion?
Sal Luciano.
Second.
David Biller, second.
Motion by Sal, seconded by Mr. Alvarez. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. So we'll move then to item 5, review, discussion, and possible action on the Tier 4 status of the City of West Haven. Let me get there. All right. We have postponed this particular, we haven't postponed the meeting, I guess, because it's a regular meeting, but we've postponed action on this item for a couple of weeks to allow time for possible resolution of litigation related to the Marb's rejection of the city's contract with the police force and its pension provisions. We have created an ample public record to date on that topic, so I'm not going to rehash all that here today. I just want to indicate that the board and its staff, along with the Attorney General's office, spent considerable time, money, and effort to try to get to a pension plan that was more financially favorable for the city and its taxpayers. At the end of the day, we found that there was not a constructive partner on the other side of that litigation, and so the discussions came to a conclusion. As for the status of the Marb's rejected police union agreement, that is a matter that the West Haven Police Union and the city will have to contend with going forward. So we've scheduled this meeting to get on with our business with the City of West Haven. Any questions or comments about any of that so far? Before we take any questions on that, I would remind members that we should not talk about any of the specifics of the failed settlement mediation, as all dealings and offers during that settlement mediation are confidential and protected communications. But if you have general questions about that process, we do have staff and the AG's office here to respond. Any questions about that matter? Okay, seeing none. With regard to the matter of the city's, let's see, I'm going out of order here. Why don't we go ahead and take up the Protiviti Personal Services Agreement Amendment. The amendment with Protiviti has been extended to June 30, 2025. Protiviti will continue assisting the West Haven Finance Department with a focus on development of policies and procedures. At the last Marb meeting, there was discussion as to who would be paying for the last 3 months of this contract. We will be covering that at OPM. We will not be asking the city for that compensation for that consultant. Our intent is that the consultant would finalize some work products, some proposed policies that we will offer to the city for their review. No obligation to impose them or to adopt them, but we would like to finish up and get the benefit of Protiviti's wisdom on those matters. Kim, do you have anything to add?
I do, thank you.
Go ahead.
I would suggest, of course, we have counsel here, that maybe we take a vote on that because we do have an MOA in standing that between the Marb and the city that states that they are to reimburse everything.
Okay.
Okay.
So the motion would be that we would not require the city to cover the last 3 months of the Protiviti contract.
So moved, Sal Luciano.
Moved by Mr. Alvarez, seconded by Mr. Luciano. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. So then we'll move on then to the Protiviti Financial Manager Trackers. A copy of the audit tracker and policy tracker reports from Protiviti dated May 9 were in your packet to review. Do we have questions about that? I see Mr. White's hand is up.
I'm sorry, I tried to take it down. Actually, my question had to do with a similar issue that we just voted on, which I believe there's still some money owed by the city. I'm trying to remember the origin, but it was to be paid over X number of years. And I'm just wondering if that is waived in place. But we can take that up later.
Would you like me to-
Kim, do you have a reaction there?
Sure. We bill the city annually, and they are up to date with all of their payments. We're going to bill them for fiscal year 25 in the next month, and I think that that will be covered. Thank you.
Other questions? Questions about the Protiviti trackers? All right. The next item is the police union pension plan. I previously described generally in broad terms where that was. One more opportunity to discuss that item if folks have any questions or comments. Okay. Then we'll move to the West Haven Tier 4 designation with the Marb. With regard to the matter of the City of West Haven's status under oversight of the Municipal Accountability Review Board, the law states, and I'm summarizing here, that a municipality designated as a Tier 4 municipality shall retain such designation until the board determines that there have been, and there are some specified criteria in the statute, that there's been no audited operating deficits in the general fund of the municipality for 2 consecutive fiscal years, that they have a long-term bond rating from one or more bond rating agencies that is investment grade or higher, and that such rating has either improved or remained unchanged since its last designation. The municipality has presented and the board has approved a financial plan that projects a positive fund balance for 3 succeeding consecutive fiscal years, and there are specific qualifications in the law as to that plan. The municipality's audit reports that an audited fund balance of at least 5% is present in the fund. And that finally, there is no evidence that the municipality has engaged in unsound or irregular financial practices in relation to commonly accepted standards in municipal finance. I interpret that personally to mean during the period of there being a Tier 4 municipality, because obviously there were some prior to that. The board may undertake this determination, the determination that they've met the criteria described in the law, and they may do so at their discretion, the board's discretion, or upon request of the municipality. If the board determines that a municipality has satisfied the criteria in the law, the OPM secretary is empowered, in consideration of the fiscal condition of the municipality and the best interests of the state, to terminate such municipality's tier designation or redesignate the municipality to a lower tier. I then have some notice I have to provide to accomplish that termination and redesignation, if any. The City of West Haven has requested to exit the Municipal Accountability Review Board oversight without being placed in another oversight tier. The city states that it has met the required financial and governance criteria, and the city issued its financial audits for fiscal years 22 and 23, and we had a timely fiscal year 24 audit which cleared all material weaknesses. The West Haven Subcommittee met in February to discuss the criteria that the city is required to meet to be released from Marb oversight. Subcommittee members discussed the statutory criteria for evaluating financial soundness. They've discussed recent audit reports. They discussed the status of unfunded liabilities and the police pension litigation. Also discussed were concerns that if one of the 2 independent fire districts fails, what the city will do about that. Is there a contingency plan? The subcommittee discussion was robust, but there was no unanimous agreement on specific criteria for releasing the city from Marb oversight, with individual members expressing their views along with a full board discussion that ensued later. So we have aired these, and these have been on the board's discussions have been public. My own view is that the city has met the criteria for release, and should the board determine that the city has met the criteria, I would exercise my discretion to terminate the designation and not designate the city to a lower tier. So at this point, are there any questions or points that anyone would care to make? I see Sal has his hand up.
Yes, thank you. West Haven, I think this is the third time that they've required state of Connecticut intervention. They've had a long history of having difficulties, and I say that euphemistically, actually. And I think the last 8 years, unfortunately, we've had to drag administrations kicking and screaming towards good fiscal practices. This mayor has done a really good job and has moved quickly and strongly to get West Haven's fiscal house in order. I wish that there wasn't this pension problem that I think will happen, not immediately, but in a few years as a burden to the city. I wish that weren't the case, but it is. I think it's time that we let West Haven go. I think there's a commitment to good fiscal practices that were not in place for over 8 years, I believe, that we've been doing this with the town. I think they've met the criteria for release, and I think we should let them go.
Mr. White.
Yes. There's one criteria that's not in the statute that I think, quite frankly, is most important and that they have satisfied. And that is a change in culture. That was one of the reasons we put them into tier 4. Therefore, before they came in, the budget had not been balanced, and that did not appear to be a problem. Since then, with the help of Michael DeMassa, I think the city has recognized that good financial practices is in the city's best interest. The new mayor, I cannot congratulate her more on changing that culture in conjunction with some folks that have come on with her and shortly before she took place. So I think that the culture, which is something that had contributed to what Sal said, multiple oversight. I think that has changed. I hope that the electorate sees that and continues that practice. And those in the mayor's office and on the council, I've noticed a change in the council, would keep that up. So I will be in favor of this and would support the motion. I do hope that there is some follow-up in some way where the city does put forth the contingency plan for the fire district in the event a fire district goes under. But again, that's not part of this discussion. So I'm in favor of it.
Thank you, Mr. White. Yes, we will be corresponding with the city after today to obviously pass along the proclivity materials and offer other words of wisdom, we hope, for them, and we'll include thoughts about the fire districts. Mr. Falsigno.
Yes, I wanted to say that I am in favor of not putting them on any tier. And the reason being is that when I came on this board 6-7 years ago, every month I came in and I was always interested to see what next would happen in West Haven. And much to my happiness, I am very, very impressed with the people in West Haven. I think the mayor does a wonderful job, has straightened it out very quickly. I think they have a very strong town attorney. I think her assistant is sharp, and I have nothing but confidence in West Haven at this point. I still have my reservation about the pension that I always have. I think that is something that has to be paid attention to and fixed somehow in the future if it can be fixed. And I hope that this is a lesson overall for the city of West Haven. Next time they have elections, that they elect people that are competent, and they have at this point. So I wish them the best.
Ms. Weisselberg.
Thank you. I want to echo everyone else's comments in saying I also support the release of West Haven from Marb overall. And I've only been on the board 2 years. I was involved in its creation a number of years ago. But I want to thank the secretary and his staff for all their diligent work over the years around West Haven, and this mayor, Mayor Borer, and her staff for working so hard to bring West Haven to financial stability. Thank you.
Is that Mr. Biller with his hand up?
It is, Mr. Secretary. Good morning.
Go
So joining the bandwagon, I definitely want to commend Mayor Borer and her entire team, as well as the citizens of West Haven. You've made great progress over these last several months and made great strides toward restoring common sense to government, something that is often sorely lacking. I also think that the current administration has just demonstrated the willingness and the ability not only to right the ship in West Haven, but to also work proactively to restore long-term fiscal survival. So kudos again to Mayor Borer and her entire team. And for those reasons, I certainly and happily can support the motion.
Thank you. Other comments? Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you. I just want to also echo the opinions of my fellow board members. I will be supporting this motion to release West Haven today. I think this really is a success story for the city of West Haven and the citizens of West Haven, and also a success story for the Marb board and the leadership from secretary and the staff of OPM. So congratulations really to West Haven are in order, and to the mayor in particular. It's clear that your leadership and all of the steps that you've taken in the relatively short period of time you've been in office are what has brought us to this point. So congratulations. Thank you.
Anyone else on the board? I see the mayor. Oh, Kevin, Mr. Alvarez.
Obviously, just echoing everything that's already been said, I don't think anybody's surprised that I am supportive of this, but I did want to acknowledge that while the mayor has done a truly incredible job, as well as her team, and Mr. Gormany, I think, was the best hire that West Haven could have made. I also wanted to recognize Ms. Kennison and the work that she has done for a number of years on this that has really, really been incredibly challenging work, but was incredibly valuable both to the city and this whole process. But I think it's an incredible success story of West Haven becoming one of truly the, I think, best managed municipalities in the state because of the leadership of the mayor. So I'm very excited and supportive of this.
Ms. Hammersley.
Thank you so much. I couldn't be the only Marb member not speaking. I too will be supporting this motion. I would like to congratulate the mayor and her administration and her team. And thank you, OPM staff, for all the great work that you do. Thank you.
All right, Mayor, I'm gonna let you say something and then I'll say something and then we'll vote. Go ahead. Mayor
Sure.
Borer.
Okay. So first of all, thank you for all the kind comments. I don't know where to start. I'm not sure if everyone knows, this is a little full circle for me. When I was a new legislator in 2017, this program was being developed. I heard of the Municipal Accountability Review Board that was being established, and there was funding being put in place, restructuring funding to help struggling municipalities. And some of you probably were part of that process of putting that program together. And I remember I walked over to Nancy Wyman's office, who was a lieutenant governor at the time, and knocked on her door and said, I understand this program is being developed and you might want to put some funding in a line item for West Haven, because I think West Haven is heading, for some significant financial struggles. And she called the OPM director at the time, who was Ben Barnes, and and her voice said, I got this state rep from West Haven in my office, and she's saying, West Haven might need money, and put a little extra in, and OPM did put the restructuring funding in place. Fast forward 6 months later, the legislation passed. All of you were appointed. The board is in place, and come to find out, West Haven was $18 million in the hole. We had an $18 million deficit, and it was deficit bonded, and enter the Marb. And you were the cavalry. Without that financial lifeline, I don't know where West Haven would be today. But you had said at the time, this is not a gift, right? We're not bailing you out. We're going to provide you restructuring funding, but we are going to help you change your management and the way you do business in West Haven, because we don't want you to end up in this place again. And that's what this program is all about. You're all volunteers. You've worked a number of years. You're a bipartisan board. And, I watched for 6 years as a state representative, the struggles of your working and trying to help West Haven. And as much as you were making incredible strides, we couldn't quite get there. And I recognized that we needed a better game plan, a better foundation on the ground. And that is exactly why I ran for this position. And when I got in, you promised to partner with me and help us get it over the finish line. And it's been, as you know, a lot of day and night work throughout the year, a lot of phone calls from me to you, Mr. Secretary. I'm sure you'll be glad those are done. But I just want to thank you on behalf of the 56,000 residents in the city of West Haven for all that you have done for our city. I know they share in that gratitude with me. I get a lot of credit out there, but it takes a full team, and we have an incredible team of workers here at the city. I don't know if you could see on the screen, but there's about 100 employees sitting in our Harriet North room right now who are dedicated and knew we had to, do things differently, and they come to work every day and they have pride in their work. So I want to make sure I recognize them and thank them for all they have done. I also want to thank the governor. The governor said, if you run, I promise I will, support the city and continue to help you. And for as much as he has everything going on, no matter when I call him, he picks up the phone and he helps us. And then, of course, the residents of West Haven, who I have never met a more resilient group, community that has lived with a bit of a cloud, right, over our city, but continued to be resilient and have confidence and have hope. So I really appreciate all that they have done. With that, I thank everybody. The work that we've done, putting in a new team, and our ethics commission and our policies, and having consultants here and turning around audits and getting 3 credit upgrades in a year. We don't do that alone. We did that with all of you. So with all of that, I will say, it's probably the first time you will ever hear a politician say, I am respectfully asking you to vote us out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Congratulations to you and your team. I want to thank specifically Mr. Hamilton and Ms. Weisselberg, who recently gave extra of their personal time to try to get a better result for the city. And I appreciate their hard work, as well as the hard work and long hours that our staff put in for the city over the last couple of years. And most recently, the AG's office was a great help to us. So with that, I will entertain a motion to the effect that the Municipal Accountability Review Board has determined that the city of West Haven has met the criteria for termination of its designation as a Tier 4 municipality under Section 7-576F of the General Statutes.
So moved, David Biller.
Second, Saluciano.
Moved by Mr. Falsigno, seconded by Mr. Biller. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll move to the next part of our agenda.
Thank you, everyone. I'm gonna sign off and go join our team. Thank you again for everything.
Thank you, Mayor.
Bye.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right. That brings us to the city of Hartford. So at the May 1st subcommittee meeting, the city and the Board of Ed presented their 2025 to 2026 budgets, and the city discussed the FY 25-26 five-year plan. After presentations by the city and the Board of Ed, the Hartford subcommittee approved a motion to approve the mayor's recommended budget and recommended the budget to the Marb. After the city's presentation on the plan, the Hartford subcommittee approved a motion to approve the five-year plan with an understanding that an increase to the Board of Ed allocation would be considered as a use of future surpluses and recommended the plan to the Marb. And I understand there are folks here to take questions on that. We don't need a vote yet? Okay. So we'll move into the review and discussion of a labor contract, the Board of Ed and the Hartford Federation of School Secretaries Local 1100 AFT AFL-CIO. In your packet are copies of the summary of the agreement and of the red line copy of a tentative contract agreement between the Board of Ed and the Hartford Federation of School Secretaries. The contract is for 97 members with a term that starts July 1, 2024 through June 30, 2027. With the city of Hartford being a tier 2 municipality, the Marb does not need to approve this contract. They are here for a review of that labor contract. And I think Mr. Foster is going to summarize for us.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for having us. So as you said, this is a 3-year contract with this current fiscal year being year 1. So we'll have 2 years after this year. As you see, I'm just going to go quickly through the summary. As you see in the summary, there's some modest language changes. I won't go into a lot of detail on those. In terms of the fiscal parts of the contract, we're continuing with all of our bargaining units to gradually increase the health insurance premium cost share. So in this group, it will go up to 16% by the 3rd year of the contract, 26-27. In terms of compensation, this is a challenging group in the sense that the gaps between steps are quite large. And so really one of the starting points for our conversation was we can't do step in every year because of that. And so you'll see that in year 1 of the contract, this current year, we do have step movement, and then we have a 2% increase for those at the top step. In the 2nd year of the contract, we have a 2% increase for all, but no step movement. And then in the 3rd year of the contract, again, we have step movement and 2% for those on the top step. And that's really a function of, this contract is a little different than some of the others we brought to you recently in the sense that our secretaries really have been comparable to other comparable employees in Hartford County. And so this wasn't an area where we were feeling like we were far behind other school districts in the county. And so that's why this is a little lower in terms of the total increase than some of the other contracts we brought before you. And then the backside of our agreement just gives you a quick summary of the cost analysis. So over the 3 years of this contract, it's going to cost about $500,000. It's $200,000 in the first year, that being again this year. The total percentage increase over 3 years is 9%. And you can see we have some examples of what is the impact on minimum and maximum salaries for the members of this unit.
Questions for the board, by the board? Okay, thank you for that. Then we'll move on to the labor contract involving the Board of Ed and the Hartford Federation of School Special Police Officers, Local 1018D of the AFT AFL-CIO. In your packet are copies of the summary of the agreement of the red line copy of the tentative contract agreement between the Board of Ed and the Hartford Federation of School Special Police Officers. Contract is for 103 members with a term starting July 1, 2024 through June 30, 2028. We do not need to approve this, but Mr. Foster can provide us an overview.
Yes, thank you. So for this one, again, year 1 of this contract is the current year, but we went with a 4-year, so that we have 3 more years after this year under this contract. Again, there's some modest language changes. The one that I'm going to highlight is the next last bullet under the language changes, which is we got an agreement to extend the definition of the workday to be 8 consecutive hours between 7 and 6 p.m. That's important for us fiscally because we have lots of after-school programming, and because the previous contract said that the regular workday ended at 4 p.m. When we had security guards stay present for things like after-school programming, we were paying overtime when that programming ran past 4 p.m. So we're now able to run staggered shifts where we have some folks come in a little later and stay till 6 p.m. And so that's something we're excited about, just giving us more flexibility in terms of staffing the buildings for security purposes. In terms of health insurance, the same thing I talked about with secretaries. This unit will move to 14% as the premium cost share by the end of the fourth year of the contract. Compensation, we did make some shifts in the pay grid. This was an interesting bargaining unit. There were only 4 steps in the contract. And again, much like I said to the secretaries, the steps, there were wide gaps between steps, which make it challenging to offer step movement. And so we did in the first 2 years of the contract, we're eliminating the bottom step. And we're also adding in the first year a step between the old 2 and 3 and between the old 3 and 4 to try to make those step moves a little bit smaller. And then we also added new top steps because we eliminated the bottom step in year 1 and 2 of the contract. We're also adding new top steps in year 1 and 2 of the contract. So at the end of the contract, what that means is we end up with a contract that has 6 steps rather than 4 steps. And we've eliminated the bottom 2 steps. And unlike what I said about the secretaries, our security guards are among the lowest paid in Hartford County by a pretty wide margin. And so that is the reason for dropping the 2 bottom steps to try to make a more significant move in terms of the entry level salary. And you'll notice on the flip side where we have the salary impact, even with the increases we're doing, our minimum salary for security guards in the 4th year of this contract is only $37,000. And so they're still relatively low, although we do feel like we've made a move in terms of parity relative to where we were previously. Total cost of the contract is about $610,000. It's a 14% increase over 4 years.
Are these police officers, are they peace officers under the state statute?
They are not.
So they're not armed?
No, they're not sworn officers.
Okay. Very good. All right. Any questions about this particular contract? All right, then. We'll move on to the review and discussion of the monthly financial reports, City and Board of Education for Hartford for March 2025. Their financials were included in the meeting package. Mr. Freund is here for the city. If you want to go first.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Secretary, members of the board. The report that you have, that you received in your packets is for the reporting period 9, which is the end of March. You'll see in the report that as of the end of March, we're projecting an overall surplus of just about $8.1 million. This is an improvement in our favorability that we're projecting of about $7.1 million compared to the period 8 report. And the changes are an improvement in favorability of $5.6 million on the revenue side and about $1.45 million on the expenditure side. It's for revenues, as of the end of March, we had collected 83.7% of our budgeted revenues for the year. This compares to about 86.2% for the same period in FY24. Property taxes are at 99.8% of our budget compared to just over 100% for the same period last year. Our prior year collections, which had been lagging for the first part of the year, primarily due to a number of court adjudicated tax refunds, those have caught up, and we're now projecting our prior year taxes to exceed budget. Current levy is also very strong so far at 99.7% of budget. That compares to 99% for the same period last year. So overall, for property taxes, we're projecting those revenues to exceed budget by $6.4 million. We're also projecting some modest budget favorability in our licenses and permits. And in our intergovernmental collections, that it is projected that we'll exceed budget by about $1.5 million, and that's related to a MIRA pilot payment that we received recently. And we're also projecting to exceed budget by $1 million in our interest income. On the expenditure side, as of this reporting period, we're at 69.6% of budget overall. That compares to 65.1% for last year. And the main difference compared to last year is that we made our transfer to the capital reserve fund for our pay-as-you-go capital plan much earlier in the year this year. Overall payroll is projected to be favorable by 2.4 million. That's the net savings of our vacancies, offset somewhat by projected overtime expenditures. On the benefit side, we are projecting to be unfavorable by 3.5 million. That's partially driven by the attrition factor, which we include in the benefits section of the budget. And also, as I mentioned for several months, that our health claims trend is up compared to prior years, and we're projecting to be over by 1.25 million in health insurance. So overall, currently projecting just over 8.1 million as our end of year surplus. And I will take any questions.
Any questions for the city on their March financials? Ms. Kinnison?
Julian, I have one question. When did you make that transfer to the capital reserve and how much was that, please?
It was 11.4 million, and I don't recall which month that was, but I can find out.
Thank you.
Other questions? How about the board?
Good morning. I'm just going to share my screen onto the Teams because I have a couple slides, and you also have the printout for more details. So for our March monthly report, we just have a few slides here that we shared with our board finance committee on Monday. Overall, we're projecting to spend less this year than last year, largely driven by not having the federal COVID relief funding anymore and other reductions made as a result of that. Right now, we are anticipating a year-end deficit of about 4 million. I'm going to get into more detail about that on a couple slides. But so far this year, so March this year compared to last year, we've spent 35.5 million less than last year at this time, driven by a few factors. One is salaries, so about 9.6 million less in salaries, driven by the position reductions made for this year, and having higher vacancy rates this year than last year. There's 28.1 million less in non-salary expenses. I'll get into the details of that on the next slide. I will say part of this is due to a decrease in tuition payments compared to last year at this time, which is largely timing difference. So we do anticipate to spend more on special education tuition this year than last year. There was just a large payment that happened in March of last year that we anticipate to happen in April of this year. We are anticipating general education magnet tuition will be lower because of the cap, the 58% cap that went into place this year. We're also spending 2.2 million more in fringe benefits, but again, that's largely driven by timing differences. We anticipate that to be lower due to the position reductions and the salaries being lower. This just shows overall, last year's budget is in the yellow, this year's budget is in the blue, and how we're tracking comparatively. You can see by March, we've spent significantly less than last year at this time, and are tracking to spend less overall than last year. When we break it down by category, you can see here, again, in the certified and non-certified salaries, that combines to about 9.6 million less. That's anticipated based on the reductions in vacancies. And we're also spending less on professional contracts and services and on equipment, largely driven by not having that COVID relief funding that was funding that in prior years. And then about that 18.7 less on system-wide purchase services, that's where tuition lives. So again, you see that decrease in tuition, but we are anticipating that to come closer to last year and surpass it for special education tuition by the end of the year. Then you see the fringe on the right being slightly more, but again, driven by some timing differences. For our year-end projection, we've been updating this every month as well. We had been messaging in earlier months around January and February about a 4 to 6 million deficit. I'll go into what's driving that. We were hopeful in the past couple of months we might be able to mitigate it, but with some recent updates, we do think the deficit is currently sitting around 4 million. And I'll speak after this to just some measures or areas we're going to explore to mitigate that. So the deficit overall is driven by some unrealized revenue assumptions. So thinking we would have the federal COVID relief funding, non-lapsing fund available and not having it. One update here is that our magnet operating grant, so those are the dollars that we get from the state for the suburban students attending our magnet schools, is lower than what we had anticipated just due to student enrollment. And then some unanticipated additions to the budget. The largest ones are tuition, transportation, and utilities. Tuition alone is about 10 million more, as that continues to be our single biggest cost driver, specifically for special education. There's also some intentional adds, such as signing bonuses, but those were to a much smaller degree than the fixed expenses. The deficit's mitigated overall by the higher than anticipated vacancy savings. I will say it's lower than what we previously estimated because we hired about 80 additional paraeducators this semester. So that actually was an intentional move. We changed some of the requirements for paraeducators. So we were able to get a lot more candidates. So that's overall good news for us. It does have a fiscal impact, however. We also have included all grant revenues that were not in the original budget. And then finally, we are getting slightly more funding for excess cost in FY25 based on the legislative action, but it's only about $1 million more. So we had initially wondered if that could be up to $4 million. It's only about $1 million due to the rise in cost of special ed just statewide. And Julian and I have been talking with each other about this. Some areas we're going to look at is one, just our OPEP contributions. The board is currently 108% funded in that fund. And so we have been contributing every year. We stopped last year. We essentially didn't make a contribution. And so we are looking to do that again this year, which would help with the deficit. And we're also just going to review our benefits in general, including our contribution to MRF, because the way that the benefits work is it's applied as a percent of the salary based on an estimate that happens at the beginning of the year. But some patterns have been that that number is actually larger than the total needed to pay for some of the benefits at the end of the year. So on those fronts, there's going to be, we have a meeting actually at the treasurer's office next week to talk about OPEP. And then we're going to be tracking those benefits as we close out the year to see if that can support with deficit mitigation. But Julian and I are working together to make sure we can resolve that. We'll pause there. That's the monthly update for any questions.
Questions for the city on the March financials? So are you anticipating in the budget for 25 additional resources from the state to cover?
In 25, we are anticipating 1 million more from the excess cost, which was that 40 million additional across the state.
But not additional action of the General Assembly?
Correct, no. Only for FY26 are we making an assumption around that.
Is that true of the city?
No, we're not expecting any additional legislation for this year.
Okay. Good to know. Questions on the March financials? Ms. Hammersley.
With regards to the OPEB contribution that you previously referenced, how much would that save?
The contribution's about 1.5 million per year.
Okay, and then with the potential shift with the MRF contribution, do you have an estimate as to how much that could potentially save?
May at most $1 million, but we need to look at more of the numbers.
Okay, thank you.
With that, we'll move on then, if there are no further questions, to review and discussion of the Board of Ed's FY26 budget. You should have received an email with an attachment of the Harvard Superintendent's 26 budget. At the Hartford Subcommittee on May 1st, the board presented the budget for 26. Included in the agenda packet is a copy of their proposed budget PowerPoint used in the presentation. And they're here, obviously, to take us through that. Do we have the superintendent as well?
We do have the superintendent.
Oh,
She's
great.
online, and I'm
Okay.
just pulling up the presentation right now.
Good to see you all.
Good morning.
This is Superintendent Torres Rodriguez. Thank you. What I'm going to do is I'll just kind of do some context setting around our budget and our fiscal reality to ground the conversation, and then go over the proposed budget, including revenue, expenses, and our deficit mitigation. And finally, we will spend a little time just talking about the request from our board to the city to increase funding for Hartford Public Schools. A quick overview here. We know that in Hartford Public Schools have a perhaps what folks say is a non-traditional approach to our budget development, given that we do extensive engagement with community. And so we did conduct at least 5 months of engagement with our board, community members, schools, our families, caregivers, district teams, and city council members and our legislators in order to inform and produce our budget. So this helps support not just understanding across our community, but also our legislative advocacy and our deficit mitigation work. We've been sharing with everyone the persistent structural deficit, which is driven by our flat revenue and rising costs, especially in special education, tuition, transportation, and you heard some of our contractual obligations, salaries. And we've approached the budget process with essentially two strategies. One is to prioritize the people, time, money, in our resources in our budget that are most in alignment with our strategic plan and proposing reductions in other areas. At least that's what we set out to do. And also to engage in advocacy, both at the local and at the state level, to increase funding. This year's budget process happened within the context of multiple different external inquiries into our finances. And so I just want to note that Public Works, which was the entity that the state Department of Education identified to examine our finances and operations, found no evidence of financial mismanagement. And they did identify $400,000 in savings out of a $30 million deficit. Also want to note that the Blue Ribbon Commission found no evidence of financial mismanagement and instead highlighted the structural issues, specifically focusing on special education, tuition, and transportation that just create deep and broad financial challenges for the school system. And so for this reason, right, we focused on advocacy to target these specific structural issues, and also doing the difficult work of making reductions to our budget. So again, just to recap what you've heard, we started with the $30 million deficit based on the expenses increasing more than our revenue. The key expense drivers, right? That special education group, tuition, transportation, particularly for our students that require door-to-door service transportation, and then the salaries with our new contracts. Each of these categories are expected to increase by at least $9 million next year. And we'll just get a better visual in the next slide here as to one of the cost drivers, which are our contracts. And we are very excited that our contracts allow us to not only recruit, but to retain our outstanding educators and staff. And as seen on this slide, right, our new teacher contract increases salaries to get at parity with surrounding towns, with significant increases for our newly hired teachers. We see that that's where we see a large drop off in terms of staff transitioning out. And this costs about $6 million next year and an additional 19.6 over 3 years. And as you heard, additional contracts were recently settled with paraeducators, administrators, secretaries, and our security officers. And in all of these cases, right, we made an effort to improve that competitiveness in terms of compensation to increase folks, to just get folks to come in and join our team and stay with us. And across all of the 5 settled contracts, the added cost to the system for next school year specifically is $8.8 million. Again, we wholeheartedly believe that this is a critical, important expenditure to ensure that we have the staff and the stability and the support for our students. And just a visual here as to why it's so important for us to have made these moves relative to our contracts, right? Our current vacancies are high in some areas. We have high vacancy rates across many of our teaching roles, but especially in bilingual and special education positions. And so we're very hopeful that with the new contract, we'll be able to lower our vacancy rates. And overall, while the vacancy rate right now is at 12%, next year, the assumption that is baked into the budget is for a 6% vacancy rate based on where we were previously prior to the pandemic, which was about a 4%, and where we are today, which is at a 12%. These next two slides is just they serve as a reminder of the work that we've done in Hartford Public School in partnership with the city and several at the legislature, which was to consolidate, right size our district. This is work that we did several years ago and were, successful from the lens of reducing our footprint by 20%, right? 12 facilities coming offline, given our structural financial challenges, our continued decreasing enrollment. And while we did see some initial release, $4 million in terms of the operational costs relative to those 12 facilities over 3 years, and then an additional $11 million from staffing that we were able to reinvest in schools, in programming. I've been very frank from the beginning, from when the board initially took that unanimous vote to right size our district, that was just phase one, that given our projections, both in terms of our financial sustainability, structural challenges, including the decreased enrollment that we were projecting, that the right sizing of the district would require a phase two, if you would. The pandemic happened and that work was paused. And I still believe that, yes, it requires a reexamination, and also want to just highlight that, combined, while there were $15 million that were reinvested in programming across our system, right? It is still a highly disruptive process, right? We spent 3 years of closures, reconfiguring, right-sizing, realigning, creating pathways, many opportunities to improve services. And I believe we did improve service provision and programming. And some of those are at risk, you'll see in the budget mitigations. And so I guess the message there in these two slides is that, we did this hard work in the past. We knew the hard work relative to these difficult decisions to right size would have to be reexamined again. And, it is not lost on any of us that it is disruptive work that impacts entire communities. And if we go to the next slide, we see that, right, as projected, that the enrollment, has been also decreasing, right? We've experienced an 18% decrease of enrollment since the 2017-2018 school year, which is what the first year that we started to do the consolidation work. The decrease has been less sharp, as you see here, since the pandemic, and has begun to kind of level out in the recent years. We also know that in the years to come, given our school choice ecosystem, there will be additional seats that are going to be open, both in magnet and in open choice. And so we continue to monitor the implication. Hence my introducing that it just warrants all times for us to consider the footprint and the services that are being available to students, especially within a context in which there's the structural challenges. So let's dive into kind of like the headlines, if you will, of our budget.
We pause there in case
sure.
folks have questions about this part of the presentation. Can I ask you about slide 32, where you talk about staffing? What is your average class size, and how does that compare to the statewide average?
We actually have a variety of class sizes based on grade levels. And one of the things as we built our budget, we are still within our class sizes. CFO Richard, can you speak to the budget formula and still how we actually have not been at full capacity? One of the things that we did this time as to the way the budget was developed is to increase the number of students by 1 or 2 and still stay within the class size. I just want to be able to give you the visual.
Yes, and I believe it's about 23 students, I think in K to 2, and 28 for 3 to 5 are the class sizes. And then at the high school level, it's a 21-to-1 ratio. That's because they have more elective classes that are offered, so it's a broader set of teachers. I think middle school is, remember off the top of it, 22. Similar at middle school.
I will
Yeah.
say that we do have surrounding towns that have a lower class size, particularly in the lower grades, right? There are surrounding towns that have 18, 20 per class in lower grades. We're a little higher than that and still within our contractual obligations.
I see. The staffing ratios targets, you mentioned that on slide 32 as well. What can you tell us about that and how that compares to other towns?
So those are actually one of the changes we made this year. I can pull it up as well. One of the changes we made this year was to staff at those contractual maximums. So at the 23-to-1, at the 28-to-1, at the 21-to-1 for high school. So those are the ratios that schools now receive their staffing allocations at. They also have the opportunity through their Title I funds or other grant funds to purchase additional teachers to lower class size ratios in particular grade areas. I'm not sure actually how those ratios specifically compare to surrounding areas, but we could look into that.
What about administrative staff that don't teach? How does that compare in terms of the numbers for the kids being served?
I'm not sure if we have comparison data to other surrounding districts.
Are you asking specifically school-based, district-based?
Yes.
Both.
Employees of the board that don't teach classes.
Yeah, so I think well, one thing I'll say is in our central office, in the last 2 years, we've cut our central office by 25%. So there's 1 out of 4 positions are gone. And if you look, we have a slide later where we're going to talk about the scale of reductions over 10 years. In schools, we do have, the superintendent was speaking to the footprint. And so we do have some smaller schools. One of the reductions that our board elected to make this year was to eliminate assistant principal roles in our smallest schools. And so that was one of the moves that was made this year relative to school-based administration.
Okay. I appreciate that the slide talks about a recognition of structural deficits and a recognition of a need for continued right sizing. So let me encourage you with that. Other questions, comments? Ms. Hammersley.
Thank you. So when you're looking at central office staff, I'm curious, some of those, or administration, some of those staff members, while they might not be teachers, they are providing support to students. Is that correct?
Correct. And
That it.
I don't know, we do have a slide that goes over all the details of the central office roles and changes, so we can speak to it more. But yeah, we actually categorize central office by direct service to schools, direct support to schools, and administration. And there's 357 roles right now in the central office. We're proposing 299 for next year. And actually only about 70 of those are in the administration category. So a lot of the roles are actually out at school sites like health support, instructional coaching for teachers, psychologists for students, that type of thing. There's very few roles that are actually just purely administrative.
Thank you. And another question that I have, just generally, when I'm thinking about the SHEP agreement, and I'm guessing that you're making projections in the future for future students that are going to exit Hartford Public Schools to attend the magnet school system. I know that the magnet school line item lapsed significant money as a result of students from suburban districts not attending those additional or those new choice options. I would imagine that it's difficult to make projections because if you don't get the right mix of students and the right socioeconomic mix, it's going to prevent students from Hartford to attend these opportunities.
Correct. Our own magnet schools, yes, it does prevent Hartford students depending on how many suburban students enroll.
It is extremely volatile to make the predictions, and not just around regular tuition, but there's the other element at play here, which is the special education piece. Right. And the fact that it's really hard for us to project what those costs are going to be as well.
That's it. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Other questions? You want to summarize the budget then, the proposed budget?
Yes, so again, we started with the $30 million. We engaged in deficit mitigation. And based on the first round of reductions, we reduced by 15.3. We are grateful that, the city has committed to an additional $3 million for next year, right? So then we were at 18.3. And in last year, we received a one-time $5 million infusion from the state. And so we added that as a placeholder, if you will. And so including that 5 million, we still were left with the 6.7 to mitigate. And the Board of Education asked for us to finalize that mitigation. And so we identified 6.7 in what we call high-risk reductions that, are critical to what we are doing to meet the needs of our students. So CFO Richard, I'll tag you in for a few of the specifics, and then I'll jump back on to talk about the longer term impact that the mitigations have had.
Thank you. So this slide here shows some of the specifics of those reductions. So again, we've identified 22 million in reductions. The initial set of reductions is that 15.3 that the superintendent referenced. And then you see the 6.7 is what we're calling high risk. All of these reductions were difficult to make, but those were even harder because they are directly serving students in a way that made it tough for us to make those decisions. So what you'll see in the initial reduction column, there are changes to the general education staffing ratios. That's what I just referenced. It was bringing some of those to the contractual maximum for an increase about 1 student per class and about 1 reduced teaching position per school. We also changed the allocation for non-certified positions. So those are other support staff members, such as a student engagement specialist or a family support, and non-salary expenses for schools. But like I mentioned, they did have their grant funds where they could choose to fund supplemental purchases. We reduced the security guard allocation, not any of the positions that exist at school sites, but there was a set of floater positions that worked across schools that were reduced. We eliminated the magnet supplement. So the magnet supplement was additional dollars per pupil that the magnet schools were receiving. This used to be closer to $1,000, I believe, per pupil several years ago. And every year it's been being phased out, where this year will be the last year. So there'll be no additional funding for the magnet supplement next year. I'm going to skip down just to cover those initial reductions, and then I'll discuss the high risk ones. You can see the central office positions. There's about 4.3 million there, 40 positions, primarily managerial. And again, I'll go into the detail of the specific FTE changes. Some reductions in non-salary expenditures at the central office level. And then finally, a reduction target around special education door-to-door transportation. So the superintendent mentioned this is one of the biggest drivers of our transportation budget. It's about 75% of the transportation budget is special education door-to-door. So that's written into a student's IEP. It is picking them up at their door and bringing them to school. We're not going to be changing any students' IEPs, but we will be just reviewing our processes for determining special education door-to-door transportation, just given that's one of our biggest areas of cost. In the high-risk reduction section, you'll see this includes some support for high school students around graduation and engagement. So we have student support and success centers. We have a Hope Academy, all dedicated to graduation support, and Opportunity Academy, which helps some of the more disengaged students. We also have our contracts with Ready CT and CT Rise that support career pathway and 9th grade academy work. For our full service community schools, we cover partnerships with community partners. We'll be maintaining those that are covered by grants, but we will be getting rid of those that we cannot cover through grants, which is about $1 million. As Deputy Foster mentioned, we're eliminating the assistant principal positions at our smallest schools, so schools with fewer than 250 students. We made additional central office position reductions specifically to instructional coaches that support teachers. More non-salary expenses. This was around building and grounds. And then finally, we're reducing services at our health and dental clinics. So we offer health and dental services to students, and we're reducing those that are not covered either by our state grant or Medicaid reimbursements. And that difference is about $1 million. So as I mentioned, those are really difficult reductions to make. Our board grappled with it as well, but we made these reductions in an effort to balance the budget. When we get into more of the details, this shows revenue and expense. It compares this current fiscal year, FY25, where you see blue is revenue, green is expense, and those were balanced. You can then see in that second to left graph, that's where we projected a $30 million gap between revenue and expense. And then we've been doing the work around mitigation. You can see in the second to right chart, that's where we were initially, where we had a 6.7 gap. And then our board voted to fully mitigate the budget. So you can see it is balanced at that 452.1. Taking a deeper dive into the revenue, you'll see the top is this year's budget, the bottom is next year's budget. You can see that education cost sharing piece from the state and then the city of Hartford remains flat. So that's what we call our ECS, just baseline funding. Where you see increases is in the state grant section. So that includes any additional ECS that we receive goes into our Alliance grant. So we submit a grant application for those dollars. There's an increase to that because it's the final year phasing it in next year, and an increase to the excess cost based on our numbers from this year, including that additional 1 million from the additional dollars invested at the state level. You'll also see at the federal level a slight increase. That's due to grants that we received, specifically our North Hartford Ascents Pipeline grant, which is a federal grant for our North Hartford schools. And then we also have school improvement grants. So those are federal dollars administered through the state for our lowest performing schools. You will then see the assumption of state additional contribution for $5 million. Again, that's based on tracking the legislative agenda for next fiscal year. And then the city of Hartford additional contribution for $3 million. And what you will see there is our board, and we'll get into the specifics of this, the board made a formal resolution to request from the city an additional $6.7 million in order to restore some of those high risk reductions that were made. So you can see that in the gradient. We also included this. This is the same presentation we shared with City Council when we presented. We've been looking at the flat funding, both at the state level, but also the city level, and just the impact of that relative to inflation and enrollment decline. And so what you can see here is that enrollment has been declining. However, inflation has been rising even faster. So just from the city contribution, we have about 781 fewer dollars per student than we did in the year before the pandemic. So in FY20, which is about 13 million less. So part of the request is to help keep up with the pace of inflation. When we turn to our expenses, this chart here shows the current year compared to next year with some key categories. The orange is our fixed expenses, and that's what I want to focus on. You can see in the current year, it's about 33% of our expenses are fixed. That's tuition, transportation, and utilities. What you can see for next year is that's projected to be about 38% of our budget, which means we've had to shrink the other areas. So we've had to shrink school budgets and we've had to shrink the central office budgets. You can see the schools are the dark green. That's about half of our expenses. Then those other green, blue colors are different types of central office, so support, service, and administration. So those have had to shrink as our fixed expenses expand. And this is the slide with the FTEs I was referencing. So you can see up top is our central office FTE changes. That's where I mentioned that administration category is the smallest of the three. We're proposing a shift of 58.5 fewer positions at the central office level. That's a 16% reduction in staff at the central office level. At the school level, it's about 55.9. That's a 2% reduction at the school level. So similar numbers of staff at each level. We have far more roles at the school level, and so that's a smaller overall percent reduction. And I will name this does not include the one-time funding we received from the state in this current year, as we were not counting on this. So this is just the adopted budget from last year compared to our adopted budget for next year. And I'll turn it back over to the superintendent to talk through how this trend really is a decades-long dynamic.
Yeah, this is just an aerial view, actually. Right, making cuts is not new. It's been the pattern for quite some time, and we've faced the structural deficit for years. And right, when you look across both schools and the central office reductions, the only time, right, that we did not engage in those was when we did have that infusion of pandemic relief funding. But overall, right, even if you just count from either in the last 11 years or just, since 18 during my tenure, you see to the far right, that's a lot of reductions. And so, right, we're trying to be as fiscally prudent and responsible as possible, and knowing that we're at a situation now in which we are having to, as part of that 6.7, make the recommendations for resources, programming, supports that were implemented as a result of some of the efficiencies that we had when we did the right sizing of the district a few years ago. And so we have been and will continue to advocate for additional funding. We also know that the city, our partners at the city, are looking to see how to support. We are grateful for the $3 million support that we're going to receive into next year, the school crossing guards, the additional in-kind supports, and know that our board, if we go to the next slide, our board, did make a formal request to city council, to the city, to increase the funding. The slide here again shows the additional 6.7 in funding. It includes, right, the graduation supports, contracts for career pathways that support our students, not only making a connection between what they're learning to what they're passionate about. We have that 12% vacancy rate. Yes, it motivated us to increase our teacher compensation and the other contracts. And still, we have to assume that there will be a 6% vacancy rate, right? That is not ideal in any context. We don't want to bet that we will still have 6% of our vacancies open, and to have to leverage that for our mitigation. And that is the reality that we're in. And so we are actually thinking then to change the assumption from that 6% to 5% to plan to fill additional vacancies. Yes, it would put us in a better space next year, in a more proactive financial position, and support potentially unrealized, right, assumptions when it comes to those vacancies. I will pause there. This is just a summary of the motion, the resolution that the board made to formally request the city of Hartford to make an additional contribution.
Thank you, Superintendent. We're going to get to the board's mayor's budget as well. They can speak to their contribution, I guess. I am troubled personally by the assumption of continued additional state aid above and beyond what's called for in the statutory formulas and above and beyond what was provided for in the governor's budget. That suggests to me that the structural deficit issue continues. Probably both the city and the board have issues there. The general government side of support for municipalities has doubled under this governor. I don't know what the specific numbers for Hartford are, but I'm happy to look into that. So the city may have some additional ability to help the board there. But I am troubled by the continued assumption of that. That suggests to me that there is a lot of work to do in terms of the deficit. It also suggests to me that I need to give some thought to whether or not tier 2 is the right number for you. If we're going to have to continue to add money above and beyond what the statutes call for in terms of the statutory grants. For the state. So other questions from the board? Mr. Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Secretary. So I do want to ask, I guess on the education side, the assumption of the additional $3 million from the city of Hartford, which was listed as a one-time from last year, is that been committed and included in the city of Hartford's budget, to your understanding?
Yes.
Yes, that the first 3 million of projected surplus in the current year has been dedicated to supplementing the FY26 board of ed budget.
Okay, but so the $3 million is in fact not a one-time at this. It's a two-year commitment, if you will, that's been made by the city to fund at that level, if I'm hearing you correctly. I mean, last year and the upcoming year.
Right, last year. Yes.
Okay, so but with respect to the $5 million from the state of Connecticut, that was a one-time, and based on what I heard the secretary say, there's been no commitment to continue that. So I guess I have the same concern the secretary has, except I would maybe take it a little further and say, I think your budget is out of balance by $5 million as it's presently standing. Unless and until that, additional $5 million comes through, you've got a $5 million shortfall in your budget as it's sitting before us.
Two responses to that. One, it is based on tracking just the legislative agenda. And so it is monitoring specifically House Bill 7277, which is proposing a grant equivalent to a 50% weight for special education. I'll also say that we have talked with our board and they are aware that we will need to make additional reductions if that does not happen. What we've been balancing is just the timing of our budget being done in April and then not knowing from the state until the end of June. But the board is aware we would need to make additional reductions if we do not receive additional funding through the legislative, specifically House Bill 7277.
So we'd like to move this along. We do need to get through the city's budget and the 5-year plan. So if we have quick questions for the board about this, I'll entertain those. Why don't we move to the city's presentation then, their recommended budget. You got that packet as well. Mr. Freund is here. Is the mayor here as well?
Thank you. The mayor's
Yeah,
on.
I'm here as well.
Welcome, Mr. Mayor. You want to
How you
walk
doing,
us
Mr.
through your
Secretary?
recommended budget?
Yeah, sure. It's good to be with all of you. I'm not there in person. I had a morning event weren't sure if we were going to be able to make it back up in time, but if whoever the slides could go to the first slide, I'll get started. So this upcoming year budget, $626 million budget, does two important things. It maintains a property tax rate at 68.95 mils. It's still in the state of Connecticut by a significant chunk, and it was important to us in this to maintain that property tax rate, but also the only way to do it in the midst of some negotiated wage increases that have been a long time. You were longtime members of the Marb know for a number of our city workers, we had stagnating revenue in some ways. We've maintained our spending increase to 0.4 of like the Board of Ed that required mitigating a number, a budget gap. And I just want to say thank you to Julian Freund and all of the work it took over many months to put forward this budget that limits spending to 0.4% in the midst of these negotiated wage. It's going to be continued pressure on the city and to squeeze out these budgets without raising taxes, but in this cycle, we're committed to that. So continues to invest city's capital assets. It pays as you go through general. You'll see in a little bit later that it does. We do consideration the potential to go back out to the bond markets at potentially some in infrastructure and critical roads, sidewalks, and sure that is backlogged. But we continue to pay out of our general capital assets within this upcoming budget. Go to the next slide. In addition, we make some small but targeted investments are important to our city. One is in violence prevention, as the federal government has slashed prevention. Public safety continues to be a real concern in our city, and our community prevention has shown to work. Statistically, Hartford has beat even we are below had the lowest number of shootings last year. Our community-based violence intervention was a big piece of that, and so we invested in a hospital-based program, which was supported by federal funds that are lapsing this year. Made early childhood and the staff at our early childhood centers. We were finding that we were having to pay to fill gaps in our early childhood centers, and the quality of care was going down. And we were going to have to either pay for overtime or pay a little more for increased salaries, and we paid for Environmental quality and compliance, this was as a result of an MOU between Hartford, the MDC, and the EPA to maintain requirement we had been failing to do for decades due to disagreements between the city of Hartford. That agreement will come with some additional regulatory requirements and some costs. And then finally, a creation of Department. It's a position we created as a public-private partnership with some remaining ARP and private funds from a festival, music festival. It's going to be held in the city of Hartford. But pretty small investments in the hundreds of thousands. The biggest investment we $3 million to the Board of Ed. And, it is a, as we announced it, a longer term commitment to the board. Yeah, the flat funding of the board budget are a little misleading in that, the M not moved, but last year the city took on school crossing guards, and this year made a commitment of 3 million, but behind that commitment was a to replace above $3 million, more than $3 million by in functions from the Board of Ed into the city of Hartford. We're looking at finance department, facility staff, a number of other potential areas where, we may be able to run functions a little more efficiently at the city side and ensure that more of the education dollars that go to the board are able to be spent in classrooms. A couple of reasons for us. One, in our conversations with folks in the legislature, one of the things that I think the state would like to see before major additional funding comes to the city of Hartford is some responsibility for place. There may be inefficiency within the Board of Ed back-end functions as areas. The other is that, and the superintendent touched on this, just the number of school buildings we have. We are also beginning conversations with the chair of the Board of Ed and the superintendent around what the reorganization of schools might look like. We have, for instance, 11 high schools across the city, buildings, high school buildings to keep operating. And that's not just of the building itself. It's the fact that special ed staff is stretched thin in school and on-school staff, on-site staff. And so, it's part of this, not just a budget item, as part of ensuring that every school building can be a center of excellence. I think that there needs to be a real reorganization of schools look like. And we are beginning those conversations as well. And so while we are hesitant right now to increase the bed, we are committed to ensuring that we work with resources to deal with some of the structural issues within the Board of Ed. The other thing I think that we are working closely with is figuring out whether we can create an in-district program over the coming year or 2 years to be able to address that rising cost of special ed year after year deficits. And so we continue to work with the state. We are continuing to look at our own, but Ed resolution, to be clear, did not ask for an additional contribution from the school. The ask was to work with the Board of Ed to identify $6.7 million through a combination of city funding, foundation funding, and state funding. And it'll be an ongoing process. And I think board members understand that and with the city and have been since we created the Blue Ribbon Commission on Education at the city. And I think that we also at the city would like to know a little bit more about what $1.7 million in cuts looks like. There was a list of items included in those cuts differ from the list of items that will get added back if there's $6.7 million for that, for instance, dental clinics for kids, which seems like a really for a lot of our students would not get added in the proposal for the superintendent for $1 million if that was found. And I think many of the members of the Board of Ed yeah, that for many of the members of the Board of Ed, that was an important factor in that dollars of cuts. So, I think there's a lot of work to be done, and the city's committed to ensure school year, but more importantly, over the long run, that we are involved in the effort to fund our schools and to create centers of excellence for all of our kids. Can we go to the next slide? This is at a high level overview. Taxes, we've seen a number of tax appeals that continue to restrict. It's something that we anticipated. In the last fiscal year, we set aside $7 specifically to deal with property tax appeals. We knew that the revenue seeing last year was probably not going to hold in the same way, and that is why, as there have been tax appeals coming in, we've still been pretty steady for this year and for the upcoming 2 years. The state change in motor vehicle depreciation reduced our collections from the state by about $1.5 million. And so that is the biggest change in the intergovernmental line item there. And then you see the treasurer projecting a decline in interest income. This is due to lower interest rates, and so you'll see that interest and rental income line item. This is based on projections from the city treasurer's. We saw on the positive side a modest increase in building permits. We've been building more in the city of Hartford. We built about $440 million. There's about $440 million worth of construction. We continue to grow that. We've cut our permitting times for building permits by over half, and we've seen a growth in that. Makes a short-term impact in revenues collected from building permits, but our only sustainable avenue is to continue to grow the grand list, and I think we are growing the grand list in pretty significant. And then some reduction in state aid as a result of the vehicle rate cap reimbursement. Go on to the next slide. Just regarding property tax revenues, I think a lot of this is explanatory. We are keeping our mill rate steady. Our tax is based on calculation in city ordinance, and our assumptions based on state aid are based on the governor's proposed budget, not on any monies coming in at some point in the final budget. That will all be revenue that we don't anticipate in the. You can go on. We can go to the next slide. To run down, there's our increase in payroll, which is our most significant outside of benefits and insurance, is driven by negotiated wage increases. Many of our and non-union employees have taken a number of 0% increase as the city was going through financial hardship. It has become, really difficult to attract and retain candidates to city government as a result of it. And also some unionized employees, the most recently negotiated general wage increases in our lowest paid employees. We found out through that there were some employees that were at sub minimum wage in certain roles. And so it was time for a lot of our unions to keep general wage increases, especially given the larger market, and so we'll continue to see general wage increase growth, and that's a real as we see revenues remaining the same for in the future, and we think we are still on a path to balance our budget, but is the one of the biggest future. Benefits are driven by increases in claims activity. Again, larger cost of health insurance, something we are watching. I will mention, by the way, just briefly, the conversation around education funding. You know, we have not only is the investment we made in education this year the largest increase of any of our line items. As a city, we invest put $9 million in just cash beyond our combined crossing guards and IT schools, which is far more than Bridgeport, New Haven, other big cities. And in our efforts to try to identify savings that we could use towards the board, the items that we've had council members propose are cuts to benefits and insurance. Past is a line item that had some surplus in it. We don't anticipate this year, and cuts to police officers potentially about 120 to fill that gap. And it's worth noting that I think on every one of these line items, conservatively but accurately, and to where we actually believe that end of fiscal year 26, and benefits and insurance is one of those places where we see the trend line just increasing substantially year over year, and are watching. Reducing our operating budget contribution to CIP again, and potentially going out to the bond market. It's a conversation I've had with the state treasurer's office. Secretary of OPM will continue to keep both in the loop as we wait. And if we do go out to the market, will obviously be a very modest offering, one that is based on deferred maintenance of roads, sidewalks, and some of our MHIS has seen increases in software and equipment service contracts, and utilities have increased due to electricity and solid waste disposal costs. Next slide. I'll run through the next few in the interest of time, but this gives you an overall sense of the expenditure base. We can probably flip through this. The next one. And then if you pull out education, the expenditure base, here are benefits and insurance, as you see, is moving the most quick, is the largest piece of that pie. That's fine, you can go on. Next slide. And then, long-term, we'll talk 5-year plan, but long-term sustainability broadly depends on increasing investment and growth. In fact, the conference I'm here in Norwalk primarily to reach out to developers and building housing. We've seen large growth in our housing market as we look at one of our greatest threats, which is our commercial tax base in our downtown, which is number 2. We're looking to be able to convert a significant amount of commercial property into has a higher valuation and can have a really positive impact on our tax base. And the conversion of the building at Pratt Street, which into residential housing, which was an office building, even after the tax fixing agreement from the city years, that will get 2.5 times as much in property taxes from the residential from the commercial. And so being able to convert our property tax being down, which right now we have more commercial space than New Haven, Bridgeport, and is really key to our long-term fiscal stability and the stability. Staying disciplined in spending, which, as you see, this budget does in a whole host, and working to improve the quality of residents in neighborhoods, working to build stronger and more thriving We made one-time investments in building commercial corridors, in investing in retail within neighborhoods to help build vibrant, and then working with the state or making a massive investment in home ownership in our neighborhoods to help as our property tax base within our neighborhoods as well, and also to allow for Hartford residents continue to build and grow wealth within our city, and then continuing to invest in infrastructure and capital assets while managing the long-term impact on our. I believe that is the end of my presentation. Oh no, sorry. The capital budget, $3 million, makes continued investments in flood control. We provide matching dollars for some federal grants we've gotten in flood control. It has been a major issue especially in north end of the city. Fire station upgrades, other facilities projects. While school consolidation, we have hit pause on some of our school construction projects for now. Pipeline to sort that out, but continue to make fire station upgrades and other facilities. Traffic calming and control, improvements along pedestrian and bike access, and also traffic calming that is a major cause of injury and in some unfortunate cases death in the city of Hartford. And then ongoing investments in roads and sidewalks. As I've mentioned, our roads and our sidewalks have been in pretty bad deferred maintenance, and I'm sure the secretary driving up and down Capitol Ave has noticed that. But we're trying to put together a capital plan that will allow for real investment in roads and over a year period.
Are there any questions from board members? Seeing none. This is something that I believe we have to approve at this meeting, correct? So then I would entertain a motion to approve the mayor's fiscal year 2026 recommended budget.
So moved, Sal Luciano.
Motion by Ms. Hammersley, second by Mr. Luciano. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next, we move into the Hartford 5-year plan, and I'll turn it back to the mayor or his designee.
Sure, and if you could throw up the slides in front of me. I'm sorry, because road I don't have slides at my disposal. So if you could throw that up, I'll walk through them. So you see an average budgetary increase of approximately 1.5% a year. It shows a balancing in over a 5-year period of revenue and expenditures. Obviously, general wage increases we anticipate will continue to grow, and we have long-term concerns around the value of our taxable property and we have, I think, been successful in this cycle and in this budget year and the upcoming budget year in kind of flattening out revenue spikes when they happen and ensuring that we deal with the long-term impacts of both general wage increases and the property tax appeals. Our hope is to continue to do that, and we are still working through potential surplus in fiscal year 28 might look like, both, whether moderate the impact for property owners in the city of Hartford. It is worth noting that the neighborhood that has the highest homeownership rate in our city is in the neighborhood, which there's a lot of poor homeowners, and when that next happens, many of them will get hit really hard. Number of elderly homeowners who are get by, and so we want to be mindful of how that hits, and yet begun conversations on how we whether we will implement that in 1 year or multiple years, but also want to continue to be mindful about increasing our contributions to education, potential capital projects that could increase our grand list, strategic investments in the future of the city. And as we come up on fiscal year 28, which is when that reval will go into effect in property taxes, continue those conversations and work closely with the Marb. You can go on to the next slide. So broader revenue assumptions, we're expecting a grand list growth of 1.5 per year, with the exception of fiscal year 28, when the assumption on reval is based on current sales data. Obviously, anticipate quite a few economic changes between now and then, but we, based on current sales data on homes, we are assuming 0% change in state aid, 0% change in interest income, and is at 1%. So, not counting on dollars that they will be there based on where the state is and where future municipal aid looks, what future municipal aid, trying to budget as conservatively as we can for the future. You can keep going. Assumptions related to expenditures, payroll average growth 0.1% a year, with an attrition factor 9.5%. Health insurance growth of 7% a year based on health historically. Pension ADEC is based on the actual Holcomb's 5-year forecast, taken directly from them. Debt service includes projected payments on a potential bond issuance of around $50 million, $25 million in obligation, and $25 million in lease purchase, specifically for fleet and IT operations. And then education, I've made note of this, but I think opportunities for completion and efficiencies within the education system. And I think once we have gone through that process, we will be in a better place to determine the best way for the city to help contribute to the Board of Ed. Again, I think that one of the best ways in the short term we can contribute to the Board of Ed, taking on some of the back office functions, being able to perform them more efficiently at economies of scale. It may help fill certain vacancies within the city. And so every dollar we spend on back office functions, we think can be $4 within our school district that go to schools. And so as we figure out that consolidation, as we figure out the reorganization of school build and what that looks like, I think we will have a better sense of what contribution to the Board of Ed like over the long run. But I will say, as mayor in my administration, we have been entirely committed to ensuring that we provide the resources that we can to the school district, but also that we are involved in the process of building out a long-term plan for our schools. And I think Board of Ed has been in lockstep with us on this. And I think in many ways it is a historic moment in the city of Hartford. Blue Ribbon Commission has pulled together Board of Ed and superintendent and members of my council and state legislators and funders and parents and many parties in the city of Hartford are all working in the same direction. And as mayor, my genuine that my willingness to put some political capital on the line for this continues to bring people to the table to work together towards a comprehensive solution that's not just a solution for this budget cycle or today, but for the next several years. You can go on slides. Major initiatives, I discussed the Blue Ribbon Commission and consolidation and efficiencies within back office function. Again, that $3 million is not just a commitment for this year, but a commitment to identify at least 3 million and hopefully far more in savings through consolidation of back office functions. Committed through this process of reorganizing schools to ensure we are able to provide education in fewer buildings and build economies of scale to create centers of excellence within our school district. Within debt and capital, we are beginning the process of planning to utilize debt as a component of our capital improvement plan. It is not the entirety of our capital improvement plan for reasons. We continue we've continued to earmark substantial amount of money out of our general fund for capital improvements, and we are not as a way of balancing our budget. We are doing this because there's a lot of deferred maintenance on our sidewalks and our critical infrastructure that I think it's time for the city of Hartford to head on. In economic development, we are focused on all types of housing, rate and workforce and home ownership. And we have had real success with new development. There's been continued to be demand. We are nowhere near, I think, the saturation point for residential within our downtown market. Every time we put up a new building, there continues to be a way for it. 46% of the folks who move into our apartments in our downtown are coming from Boston, and I think we will continue to grow housing in our downtown, and that adds tremendously to our grand list, but also focused on housing in our neighborhoods, on home ownership, on neighborhood investment. And really on the pension, we've begun a task force to look at not just potential COLA increases for pensioners, but also the fiscal health and stability and sustainability of the pension. We hope to work with the treasurer, city treasurer in the long term to manage the liability of the pension plan and to look at potential options to reduce the ADEC and all improve the fiscal stability of that pension plan. You can keep going. That's it.
Well, thank you, Mayor.
That's all I have. Thank you, guys.
Are there questions from board members? Mr. Hamilton.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the presentation. I'm just trying to understand the $3 million bridge funding for the Board of Education. Is that in your expense category? When I look at the 5-year plan, you've got education at 284 million, and then we've got it flat funded at the same number for all 5 years of the plan. So I'm trying to figure out if that 3 million is in there and continued in each of the 5 years, or is it not in these numbers and is kind of being treated separately, or how is that being handled?
It is treated separately in that it's one time, and it's based on our projected surplus in the current fiscal year. So it would be assigned fund balance or committed fund balance. So it does not appear in the future projections. The ongoing 3 million that the mayor was describing is really focusing on the expenditure side. So to the extent that we can get savings through consolidation, it frees up capacity in the Board of Ed to dedicate more to direct services, classroom services.
Are there any other questions from board members? Yep, Mr. Hamilton.
Yeah, I guess a question on the where you see this going in terms of your debt and capital plan. So you've got a plan that's, I guess, going to require approval from the OPM secretary and the state treasurer to issue bonds and lease obligations totaling $50 million, but then you're not showing any continued issuance in any of the out years. And I'm just wondering, how realistic is that? And what was your historic level of pay-as-you-go financing? And you've dropped it a certain amount, but I don't understand exactly how much you've dropped it by on a pay-as-you-go basis. So I just want to kind of understand a little bit more about where you think things are going with respect to capital improvements and the financing of capital improvements.
I'll answer the historical pay-as-you-go has ranged from somewhere in the $6 to $7 million range in the, I would say the first handful of years when the city was under state oversight. And then it reached $11 to $12 million a year the last couple of years. Current year was 11.4 million. It drops in terms of the general fund contribution to 3 million in FY26. And we're supplementing that with, there's some assigned fund balance from last year's surplus. There are funds from completed projects that have accrued in capital reserve. So we're supplementing that $3 million general fund contribution with these other sources, as well as LoCIP funding. And we're showing a carrying the pay-as-you-go at 4 million a year through the 5-year forecast. The 25 million for core infrastructure would be on top of that 4 million of pay-as-you-go. At the current time, it's the only GO bonding that we're contemplating in the 5-year planning period. The lease purchase payment is assumed to be a 7-year lease purchase for heavy equipment and public works, fire apparatus, and some key IT security and infrastructure projects. That's also the only lease purchase that's contemplated in the 5-year planning period.
I guess I'm really just making a point. I wonder whether or not that's really where you're going to end up in terms of, based on the numbers you just kind of walked through for a city the size of Hartford. I suppose you could say a $10 or $11 million annual capital spend is not very much money to invest in infrastructure and maintain infrastructure. But I am, I think this is a pretty big change in the 5-year plan. So I just think we should have some further discussion about it. Not, if this needs approval, I'm, happy to, keep things moving along. I'm just thinking in terms of future discussion for the board, and between the board and the city to understand better, what the capital needs are and, what would be the best way to go about trying to, meet those needs as best as possible.
Are there any other questions or comments from members of the board?
I have a comment.
Yes, Ms. Kennison.
First, I want to send kudos to Julian and his team and the mayor for providing us with a balanced budget in the 5-year plan. That was done last year and it's continued this year. And it's definitely appreciated that we don't have to look at mitigation measures. So that's a win. And I know that that's a lot of hard work in order to do that. So thank you for taking a deeper dive into your budget and loosening up the purse strings instead of us finding out at the end of the year that you had some good surpluses. I had another thought, but I forgot it. Sorry.
That's all right. And I'll just say to Mr. Hamilton's point, I think that's well taken and that we can continue to have this conversation going forward. If there are no other questions or comments, and if that thought hasn't come to you, then I would entertain a motion to approve the Hartford 5-year plan.
So moved.
Second, Sal Luciano.
Motion by Mr. White, second by Mr. Luciano. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? Motion carries.
Good luck.
So with that, we've already covered item 5. Item 6, other business. I was just asked to mention, I believe they're working through some scheduling with future meetings. Ms. Kennison, if you had anything to say.
Yeah, I do have an update if you'd like.
Great.
We have 2 regularly scheduled meetings on June 26th as well as August 28th, and we will be planning to cancel those particular meetings, and we can always include a special meeting at any time. As a discussion today, we may want to incorporate a Hartford subcommittee because we don't have any scheduled through the end of the year. But I just wanted to let you know that that would give us the summer off, and then we will look to get our work started again in the fall.
Fantastic. Any other things from the board? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Don't move, Sal Luciano.
Move Ms. Hammersley, seconded by Mr. Luciano. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Be safe, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.